Here's something nobody talks about. Michael Jordan hasn't played a single minute of professional basketball in over 20 years. He retired for the last time in 2003. And yet, right now, today, he makes more money than almost every active player in the NBA. Not just a little more, dramatically more. LeBron James, arguably the greatest player of his generation, earns around $40 million a year from his NBA contract. Jordan earns nothing from basketball. Zero. He hasn't touched a paycheck from the sport since the Clinton administration, and he still beats him. Last year, Forbes estimated Michael Jordan's net worth at $3 billion. $3 billion. From a sport he no longer plays, in a league he no longer coaches, for a team he recently sold. So I need you to stop thinking of Michael Jordan as a basketball player, because that's the wrong frame entirely. Michael Jordan is a business architect, one of the most ruthless, calculated, and frankly brilliant ones in American history. And basketball? Basketball was just the raw material, the ore. What he built with it is something else entirely. Today, we're going inside that empire, all of it. The deals, the leverage, the miscalculations, and the one decision made in a boardroom in 1984 that is still generating hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. And here's what I need you to hold on to as we go. The most important move Jordan ever made wasn't on a basketball court. It happened before he played a single NBA game. Most people have never heard the full story. Let's fix that. The year is 1984. Michael Jordan is a 21-year-old rookie. He hasn't played a single NBA game yet. He's talented. Everyone knows he's talented, but the league is already stacked. Magic Johnson is in his prime. Larry Bird is untouchable. Isaiah Thomas is hungry. Jordan is the new kid. And Nike? Nike in 1984 is not the Nike you know today. They're a running shoe company that's struggling badly in the basketball market. Converse owns basketball. Adidas is the prestige brand. Nike's basketball division is bleeding money. Their head of marketing, a man named Rob Strasser, has a problem, and he knows it. He needs a signature athlete, someone to bet the whole basketball category on. He wants Magic. Magic isn't interested. He's loyal to Converse. He wants Bird. Bird isn't interested either. So they come to Jordan. Now here's where most people get the story wrong. They tell it like Nike came to Jordan with a massive offer and Jordan jumped at it. That's not what happened. Jordan didn't want to sign with Nike. His mother, Dolores Jordan, essentially had to force him to attend the meeting. Jordan wanted Adidas. He thought Nike was a running shoe brand. He didn't want to be associated with something he considered second tier in basketball. She made him go. And in that meeting, Nike didn't just offer Jordan a shoe deal. They offered him something no athlete had ever been offered before. His own signature line, his own sub-brand, his own world. The deal was $500,000 a year for 5 years, plus royalties. It was the richest endorsement deal in NBA history at that point. But here's the number that matters. The internal projection Nike showed Jordan's team. They said if Air Jordan hit $3 million in first-year sales, it would be considered a massive success. Air Jordan did $126 million in its first year. Let me say that again. The projection was $3 million. The reality was $126 million. They had to scramble to meet demand. They were making shoes in factories that weren't designed for it. The shoe was banned by the NBA. Jordan wore it anyway, paid the fines, and Nike covered the fines as a marketing expense. The ban became a selling point. The commercial literally said, "The NBA won't let you wear these shoes. You couldn't buy better advertising. But here's what I want you to focus on, because this is the moment the empire actually begins. Jordan didn't just take the money, he took the royalties. That decision, made by a 21-year-old who, by his own admission, barely understood what he was signing, would eventually be worth more than every paycheck he ever received from the Chicago Bulls combined. Think about what just happened in that room. A kid who didn't want to be there. A brand nobody respected in basketball. A deal nobody thought would work. A projection that was off by 4,000%. And from that single meeting, from a mother who forced her son to show up, comes an empire worth more than the GDP of some countries. I find that genuinely hard to process. And I've read about this deal dozens of times, but here's the thing nobody tells you about that royalty deal. For almost 10 years, it nearly didn't matter. There was a moment, a real documented moment, where Jordan Brand was on the edge of becoming a footnote, a nostalgic relic, another dead celebrity shoe line, collecting dust in the discount bin. What saved it wasn't Michael Jordan. It was something nobody saw coming. Mid-1990s, Jordan retires for the first time. He goes to play baseball, and the basketball world moves on. Sales of Air Jordans crater. Nike internally starts questioning the brand's future. There are conversations about whether to wind it down, fold it back into the main Nike line, and cut losses. Think about that. The brand that would eventually be worth billions was almost killed while Jordan was playing minor league baseball. So what happened? The streets happened. A generation of kids, mostly in cities, mostly without much money, started treating old Jordans like currency. Not sneakers, currency. The Jordan 3, the Jordan 4, the Jordan 11. These weren't just shoes. They were a language, a way of saying something about who you were and what you valued without saying a word. Jordan Brand didn't create that culture. The culture adopted them. And once Nike's leadership understood what was actually happening, that the brand had escaped its original context and become something larger, something generational, everything changed. Now let me tell you what Jordan Brand actually is, because most people, including a lot of business people, have this completely wrong. Jordan Brand is not a Nike collaboration. Jordan Brand is not Michael Jordan lending his name to Nike products. Jordan Brand is a subsidiary, a separate company that operates inside Nike's corporate structure, but functions with its own identity, its own design team, its own marketing, its own roster of athletes. It is, for all practical purposes, a brand that Michael Jordan owns a significant piece of. And it is enormous. As of the most recent public reporting, Jordan Brand does approximately $5 to $6 billion in annual revenue. That's billion with a B, annually. To put that in context, that's more than the entire annual revenue of Under Armour. Jordan Brand, which sells shoes, makes more money every year than an entire sportswear company that makes shoes, clothing, equipment, and everything else. And Jordan collects a royalty on every single dollar. The exact royalty rate isn't public, but industry analysts have estimated it at somewhere between 5% to 7% of revenue. You do that math. At $5 billion in revenue, even at the low end of 5%, that's $250 million a year, passively, without doing anything. Jordan Brand's success wasn't automatic, it wasn't even guaranteed. There was a period in the mid-1990s, right when Jordan retired the first time, where the brand nearly collapsed. Sales dropped. The cultural moment seemed like it might be fading. And then something happened that no one planned for. Sneaker culture, the resale market, the collector community, the streetwear world, all of it converged around the Jumpman. Jordan Brand didn't create sneaker culture, but sneaker culture adopted Jordan Brand as its founding mythology. Original Air Jordan 1s from 1985 now sell at auction for tens of thousands of dollars. The Jordan 3, Jordan 4, Jordan 11. These aren't just shoes anymore. They are cultural artifacts. They are investments. They are status signals for a generation that wasn't even alive when Jordan was playing. Think about what that means from a business perspective. Jordan Brand has customers who have never watched Michael Jordan play a single game. They're buying the mythology, not the memory. That is brand architecture at a level that most companies spend decades and billions trying to achieve and never get there. Jordan didn't build that. The culture built it for him, but Jordan's team was smart enough to protect it, cultivate it, and never, ever dilute it. That last point matters more than almost anything else. Jordan Brand has been ruthless about scarcity and exclusivity. They don't flood the market. They don't put Jumpman logos on cheap products. They don't license the brand to random categories. The brand's power comes from restraint, and that restraint is a deliberate strategic choice. Stop for a second. I want you to think about how many brands you know that became more valuable by selling less. That grew by refusing customers. That got stronger by saying no to money. It runs completely counter to everything we're taught about business growth. And it's the reason Jordan Brand is still standing while every other celebrity shoe line from the 90s is either dead or irrelevant. Now, here's where the story gets complicated. Because Jordan didn't just build a shoe empire, he built an ownership portfolio. And the way he did it reveals something about how he thinks about money that most people fundamentally misunderstand. Here's a test. Name one athlete from Jordan's era, Magic, Bird, Barkley, Pippen, Ewing, who became a billionaire after retirement. Take your time. You can't, because none of them did. These were the greatest basketball players of their generation. They made millions. They had endorsements. They were household names for decades, and not one of them crossed $1 billion. Jordan did. So what did he see that they didn't? One word: ownership. Not endorsements, not licensing fees, not appearance money. Ownership. An endorsement deal is a transaction. You give your name, you get money. The deal ends when the contract ends. You have nothing left. An equity stake is a different animal entirely. You give your credibility, you get a piece of the upside, and if it grows, you grow with it, forever. Jordan made that shift earlier and more aggressively than almost any athlete before him. Here's exactly what it looked like. In 2010, Jordan became the majority owner of what was then the Charlotte Bobcats, the most pathetic franchise in the NBA at the time. Seriously, the Bobcats had the worst season in NBA history the year before Jordan bought them, a .106 winning percentage. They won 7 games. 7. Everyone thought he was overpaying. The purchase price was around $275 million. Here's the part people forget. The sports media laughed at him. Not quietly, openly. Analysts said he was buying damaged goods, that he was letting ego drive a bad decision, that Jordan the competitor wanted to own a team because he couldn't stand watching from the sideline and was going to lose a fortune proving it. He rebranded them to the Hornets, invested in the team infrastructure, and 14 years later, in 2023, he sold his majority stake for $3 billion. Every single person who laughed had to watch that number cross the wire. On one transaction, Michael Jordan turned $275 million into $3 billion. That's a 10 times return. on a bad investment in a damaged asset that everyone told him to avoid. That's not luck, that's not timing. That's understanding something fundamental about the NBA as an asset class. That franchises only move in one direction over time, and that the people laughing at you rarely understand what you actually bought. He didn't bet on the Bobcats, he bet on the league. Big difference. There's something about watching Jordan in ownership mode that's different from watching him play. On the court, everything was visible. The effort, the fury, the will. In a boardroom, in a franchise deal, at a NASCAR negotiating table, it's all invisible. You only see the outcome years later, when the numbers come out and everyone suddenly understands what he was doing the whole time. That patience, that willingness to wait years for the market to validate what he already knew, is the single most underrated thing about how he operates. In 2021, Jordan partnered with Denny Hamlin to found 23XI Racing, a NASCAR team. I want you to sit with that for a second. A black basketball legend from North Carolina investing in NASCAR, the whitest, most southern, most culturally distant sport from everything Jordan represents. On paper, this makes zero sense. The demographic overlap between Jordan brand customers and NASCAR fans should be nearly zero. That's exactly why it was brilliant. NASCAR has a massive, loyal, underserved fan base with huge purchasing power and almost zero crossover with premium streetwear and luxury spirits, which is precisely where Jordan already operates. It was a white space play, not chasing an existing customer, creating a new one. And 23X, I signed Bubba Wallace, one of the only black drivers in the sport, as their lead driver. The symbolism was intentional. The optics were calculated. The cultural bridge was real. This wasn't charity. This wasn't clout. This was Jordan looking at a category that was undervalued, underpenetrated, and ripe for exactly the kind of premium repositioning he'd spent 30 years learning how to execute. In 2019, Jordan co-founded Cincoro Tequila with 4 other NBA owners, including Jeannie Buss and Wes Edens. The tequila market was, and is, one of the fastest-growing spirits categories in the world. Cincoro isn't positioned as a celebrity tequila. It's positioned as a luxury tequila. The bottles are beautiful. The price points are high. The brand stays away from the athlete party image and leans into sophistication. A bottle of their Añejo Extra, their premium tier, retails for around $1,500. This is deliberate. Jordan brand has always operated in the premium space. Cincoro extends that positioning into a different category. And it works because of a principle that Michael Jordan has applied, consciously or not, throughout his entire business career. He only puts his name on things he can dominate. Why does Jordan's brand work when so many athlete brands fail? Because they do fail. Constantly, spectacularly. Athletes launch clothing lines that collapse. They sign endorsement deals with brands that go bankrupt. They invest in restaurants that close in 18 months. The graveyard of athlete business ventures is enormous and largely unexamined. So why is Jordan different? I think the answer has 3 parts, and none of them are what you'd expect. Part 1, Jordan never needed anyone. This sounds like a personal character trait, but it's actually a business strategy. From the earliest days of his career, Jordan projected a kind of radical self-sufficiency. He didn't seek validation from the public. He didn't court popularity. He played to win, not to be liked. And paradoxically, that made people worship him. The scarcity of his approval made it more valuable. When Jordan endorsed something, it didn't feel like a cash grab, because Jordan famously didn't need the money. It felt like a quality signal, like he was letting you in on something he actually believed in. Compare that to athletes today who endorse anything and everything. Crypto platforms, fast food, dubious supplements, gambling apps. Every new deal dilutes the signal a little more. Every questionable endorsement makes the next one slightly less believable. Jordan understood, again, maybe intuitively, maybe strategically, that saying no was a form of brand investment. And here's my honest opinion, which I know some people will push back on. Most athletes today are destroying their own brand in real time and calling it diversification. The number of NBA players with cryptocurrency endorsements who watch those platforms collapse, taking their credibility with them, it's staggering. The number of athletes who signed with fast food brands and made themselves permanently unserious in the luxury market. The number of guys who took the quick $500,000 instead of holding out for the equity. Jordan's generation didn't have the internet. They didn't have the pressure of constant visibility, but they also didn't have the excuse. Jordan chose differently, and the scoreboard is clear. Part 2. Jordan's competitiveness is his product. The Last Dance documentary did something fascinating. It showed Jordan being petty, obsessive, difficult, irrational. The kind of competitor who would invent a slight just to have something to be angry about before a game. And the audience loved it. Why? Because it was authentic. Jordan's pathological need to win isn't a bug in the brand narrative. It's the entire foundation of the brand. People don't buy Jordans because Michael Jordan was a nice guy. They buy Jordans because Michael Jordan was relentless. And when you strap on those shoes, some part of your brain makes the association. That's not brand management. That's myth creation. And myths don't expire. I'll go further than that. And this is a take I haven't seen many people make explicitly. The Last Dance was the best business investment Michael Jordan ever made that didn't cost him $1. That documentary ran in 2020. Jordan Brand's revenue jumped significantly in the following years. A generation that barely remembered Jordan playing suddenly needed the shoes. Parents watched with their kids, kids bought with their parents' cards. The myth got transmitted to a new host population. Jordan didn't just allow that documentary to happen. He controlled it. He had final cut approval. He decided what you saw and what you didn't. That's not a retired athlete doing a nostalgic look back. That's a CEO running a product launch disguised as a sports documentary. Part 3. Jordan understood what he was selling before anyone told him. There's a moment in various interviews with people who worked with Jordan early in his career. They talk about how unusually strategic he was for his age. Not book smart, strategic. Instinctively strategic. He understood that he wasn't selling basketball skills. He was selling a feeling. The feeling of being the best. The feeling of absolute certainty. The feeling that no matter what happens, you are the one who decides how it ends. That feeling is not attached to a sport. It's not attached to a decade. It's not attached to any cultural moment. It's universal. It's timeless. It's available to a 14-year-old in Tokyo in 2024, just as much as it was to a 30-year-old in Chicago in 1993. That universality is the engine of everything. I want to be honest with you for a second, and this is me stepping outside the analysis for a moment. I started researching this video thinking I was going to make something about business strategy, royalty structures, franchise valuations, brand equity, and all of that is in here. But the deeper I went, the more I kept coming back to one thing that had nothing to do with money. Michael Jordan grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. His father worked at a General Electric plant. His mother was a bank teller. He got cut from his high school varsity team as a sophomore, and 40 years later, his name generates $250 million a year, passively, while he sleeps. I'm not saying that to be inspirational. I genuinely find it one of the strangest, most extreme outcomes in the history of American capitalism. The distance between where he started and where he ended up is so vast that it almost doesn't feel real, and yet it is real. Every number in this video is real. I think that's worth sitting with for a moment before we get to the part of the story that complicates everything. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, this sounds like a perfect story, too perfect, like a case study written after the fact to make everything look inevitable. You're right to be skeptical, because the story isn't perfect, and the parts that aren't perfect are the most interesting parts of all. I'm not here to tell you a fairy tale. Michael Jordan made mistakes, significant ones, and understanding the mistakes is just as important as understanding the wins, maybe more so. Let's be honest, as a basketball executive, Jordan was for a long time not good. The Bobcats, now Hornets, made some genuinely baffling draft decisions under his ownership. In 2009, with the number 2 pick in the draft, they took Hasheem Thabeet, a center, instead of Stephen Curry, who went number 7. Stephen Curry. The same Stephen Curry who went on to win 4 championships, change how basketball is played, and become one of the most valuable athletes on the planet. Jordan, the greatest basketball player who ever lived, failed to recognize the greatest shooter who ever lived when he was sitting right there. That's a cautionary tale about the limits of domain expertise. Being great at playing something doesn't automatically translate into being great at managing it. Jordan has openly admitted this. He said years later that he had to learn how to be an owner the hard way. He had to hire better people. He had to accept that his competitive instincts, which served him brilliantly on the court, sometimes worked against him in a boardroom. That self-awareness, slow as it came, is itself a business skill. Jordan tried several things over the years that quietly faded. He had an interest in a motorsports venture before 23XI. He explored ownership opportunities in baseball. There were restaurant concepts and hospitality plays that didn't gain traction. We don't talk about these much because they didn't scale. But they happened. And the lesson there is simple. Jordan's success rate is not 100%. No one's is. What separates the great business builders from the merely lucky ones is the ratio, far more hits than misses, and the scale of the wins relative to the losses. Jordan's wins are so disproportionately large that the losses barely register in the final accounting. That's not luck. That's the mathematics of asymmetric bets. When you make enough smart bets in the right direction, the winners compound and the losers are just tuition. But here's the question I keep coming back to. The one that I think nobody ever really asks. What happens to all of this when Michael Jordan is no longer here? What happens to a $6 billion brand, a cultural mythology, an empire built entirely on one man's name and one man's image, when that man is gone? I went deep on this, and what I found genuinely surprised me. Here's the final question, the one that actually matters for understanding what Jordan built at the deepest level. What happens when Michael Jordan is gone? This is the test. This is how you know if someone built a business or a personality cult. Personality cults die with their founders. Businesses outlive them. And Jordan Brand, if history is any guide, will outlive Michael Jordan by decades, possibly by generations. Here's why I believe that. Jordan Brand has crossed the threshold that almost no celebrity brand ever crosses. it has become self-referential. The brand no longer primarily derives its power from Michael Jordan, the living person. It derives its power from the idea of Michael Jordan, the mythology, the aesthetic, the cultural grammar of the Jumpman. That idea is now bigger than any single person can own or control. When you see a kid in Seoul wearing Air Jordan 1s, he's not thinking about a man who played basketball in Chicago in the 1990s. He's thinking about something more abstract, about excellence, about style, about a certain way of carrying yourself in the world. Jordan Brand is that abstraction now. And abstractions don't retire. They don't age. They don't get caught up in scandal or decline. They just persist, adapting to each new generation that discovers them. Nike obviously knows this. It's why they've structured Jordan's deal the way they have. It's why Jordan Brand operates as its own entity, with its own continuity, independent of Jordan's day-to-day involvement. The machine runs itself now. Which brings me to the final lesson, the one that I think is the real thesis of this whole story. I want to leave you with something uncomfortable. We've spent the last 30 minutes talking about Michael Jordan like he's a genius, a visionary, someone who saw what others couldn't and built something extraordinary. And all of that is true. But here's the other side of it. The part that doesn't make it into the Forbes profiles or the business school case studies. Michael Jordan is 61 years old. He sold the Hornets. He stepped back from day-to-day involvement in most of his ventures. And the empire, the $3 billion empire, keeps running. Without him, the royalty checks arrive. The Jumpman moves product. The mythology sustains itself, which means one of two things is true. Either Jordan built something so well designed that it genuinely doesn't need him anymore, or, and this is the uncomfortable part, Jordan was always somewhat incidental to the outcome. The right person, in the right moment, who made a few key decisions correctly and then got out of the way while forces much larger than him, culture, sneaker collecting, the NBA's inexorable growth, the globalization of American sports, did most of the actual work. I've thought about this a lot, and I genuinely don't know which answer is right. Maybe both are, but here's what I do know. The lesson that most people take from Jordan's story is, be exceptional, leverage your name, build smart. The lesson I take is different. It's this: the best business decisions are the ones that don't require you to keep making decisions. The royalty deal wasn't great because Jordan negotiated hard. It was great because it kept paying him whether he showed up or not. The franchise ownership wasn't great because Jordan ran a great team. It was great because it appreciated while he slept. The brand mythology isn't great because Jordan keeps tending to it. It's great because the culture tends to it for him. Passive, compounding, self-sustaining. That's the empire. Not 6 championships, not the logo, not the shoes. The architecture of a system that generates value without requiring the person who built it to be present. Most people spend their whole lives earning. Jordan spent his building something that earns for him. The question isn't whether you can replicate what Jordan did. The question is, what are you building that doesn't need you to keep showing up?